Okay, excellent. So we are at the Finance Committee meeting of May 14th, 2019. I want to thank our city auditor for being here with us, and we do have a full committee here. We've had a couple of meetings where just schedules didn't work out, so I apologize to members that we just had to schedule it anyways, and I really appreciate y'all being here tonight and us being able to talk about the capital improvements plan and then just overall a few city finance subjects. So just to kind of give a background to the capital improvements plan. So we passed a capital improvements plan. We passed a draft plan as part of the financial recovery plan, and it included a whole bunch of stuff that are really needs of the city. Various city departments had expressed needs and inputs on it, and a few wants as well. Things that it would be nice that the city could have. One of the ones, for example, is just trying to work on the police academy and trying to get that back in order. So we have that scheduled for 2020. So as part of the capital improvements plan, though, in the financial recovery plan, we passed appropriations already that matches what was the draft plan for 2019. So for 2019, any items that were to get amended or edited, we'd have to replace things or just leave it or not do it, but we'd have to replace things with other items that are in that same key. So for example, if we look at let's look at this public lands and buildings, which is on page 3 of the draft capital improvements plan. We estimated $200,000 to replace City Hall's roof system. So potentially the estimate that we've gotten back it could be less than that. And so if we were to add additional dollars into, with potentially the $100,000 to $110,000 less than what we had originally estimated, we'd have to do it in the public lands and buildings key under the specifically under the capital expense key. So we're going to talk about that a little bit later, but just know that with the plan. And so, but we do have the opportunity to amend this plan, especially for years after 2019. So if there's items after 2019 that we want to see changed or adjusted, then we definitely can make that happen. Even though the financial recovery plan does, it does reflect what we have here. So if we said that we would need a new dump truck in 2020, and that would be $82,000, the financial recovery plan currently has $82,000 in 2020 for capital expense for that dump truck. However, we definitely have the opportunity more. This is not a binding document, so we can adjust it for the future if we want to, and still, I think we'd still be fine there. So just kind of keep that in mind as we move forward. I'd like to bring this to council to vote at the first meeting in June, and so I'd like to have at least one more finance committee meeting before we introduce it to council. But I wanted to bring this up to you all so that you all could tell. If I do get some actual updated numbers from the city, which I have a few things that we might be able to change, I'll make the changes and send them out to the rest of council, or the auditor might send it out. I think he might actually have the most up-to-date document of this one. But we'll make sure it gets sent out so that you all know what has been reduced or what potential opportunity there is. There are a few items that we are going to need to add to this whenever we get to that point, or to change, and specifically it will probably do it in the public lands and buildings. So, and are you going to talk about the computers later, or is it okay to talk about that now?
I was not going to bring that up, but
okay.
we can touch briefly on that.
Yeah. So, okay, cool. So we actually have a lot of our computers are using Windows 7. So we have a lot of computers from 2010, 2011, 2012, and Windows 7. The support ends on that sometime in the next 6 to 8 months. And so the city's going to have to essentially purchase 40 to 50 computers in order to upgrade them so that we can run the newest version of Windows on it. So we could spend, $500 or $600, so much money to have somebody come in and reformat it and install Windows 7 on some of these old computers, or we could spend $800 to $900 and actually just get new computer, monitor, keyboard, mouse already ready to go. And so, really it looks like a much better financial decision just to buy the new computers. So that way we're upgraded, and really then we're setting the city up for success for the future, because we don't know what the financial situation of the city ever is going to look like. And so if we can go ahead for not that much more, give them something that's going to last them another 4 years or so, then I think it'd probably be the right move to do. So T.A. Brown, he's the law secretary / our frontline IT person. and he does a great job at both those roles. He's worked extensively to find us the best deal. So we usually use our S&H Consulting to buy computers, but he's been able to work directly with the rep from Dell and actually gets them even cheaper, and S&H can't even touch the price that Dell's willing to sell them to us for direct. So, which that's really exciting, and happy that he's working on that. The other item that we're going to need to potentially look at is we received a letter. I don't know if this was emailed out to us, but it's in the massive packet of stuff that you all have on your desk here. But there's a letter from the Safety Service Director talking about, he quotes apparent landslide type conditions behind 2 to 3 homes on Mound View Drive, and that it's adjacent to city property. And so potentially they're going to need some funding in order to get some geotechnical engineers to do soil testing, learn what's causing the landslide type problems, and also to then figure out whose responsibility it is to correct the problem. So we'll know more at the council meeting tonight at 7:30. There is going to be somebody, according to the letter from JMA, that's going to come and kind of talk about it. It's a PE, a professional engineer, that will be here for that. So just know that potentially we're going to need to add money for that as well. So anyways, a lot of information that was just kind of thrown out there. Do we have any questions about that right now? Yeah, please.
Thank you, Mr. Bonsall. So through our Ward 1 Community Council meetings, I've been collecting feedback, soliciting feedback, and in our last meeting, one of the residents raised a question about the water fund. And in one of our maybe last 2 months of regular council meetings, I think, it could have been the recovery meetings, a lot of meetings, there's an audit going on into the water fund. I don't think we've received any final results yet, but what was raised in terms of the capital improvement plan is, are the water meters actually reading accurately? And whether or not that's causing some of the disparity in terms of funds. I don't know where water meters land in terms of responsibility, but when we're thinking about upgrades across the city and how that affects long term, I felt like that was important to consider. And so I want to throw that question out here first too. I felt like early in my term on council, we kind of discussed replacement of water meters, but I could be wrong. So I'm just curious if anybody has top of mind any intel on, has the city thought to upgrade the water meters and what that determination was?
I could probably speak a little bit. I know, I would say several years back, maybe 5, they did replace the water heaters, or the water meters. They wanted to do it in all the homes. Like, let's say you had an issue with your water line, you had to have your water cut off, the city come out and do that. If they noticed you had an older water meter, they would replace it. So I know that happened, probably still happening. I mean, okay. So if you have an outdated water meter and you have an issue with your home and you have the city out and they see that that's an outdated water meter, they are replacing them. Now, I guess I'm talking 4 to 5 years ago. So,
Okay.
I believe they still do that, and it's when there's an issue, or if they're, like you said, if they're coming out and they inspect and they see an old one, but there's not been an across-the-board replace all of the meters in the city plan. I believe that the Safety Service Director did pull some numbers together on that, or at least some rough estimates several years ago, going back probably 8 or 9 years ago. Although they do replace them kind of as needed, or throughout the year, a blanket replace all of them. It's very costly, but it has been looked into in the past.
Okay.
Because one advantage to that is the remote reading, where they don't have to go into your house. No self-reporting.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. That's helpful. I'll follow up some more on that as well. The other thing that I noted, and Mr. Bonsall, you spoke to this, we have received some quotes already for some of these projects, and they seem, at least the 2 that I'm recalling, to be coming in under what we budgeted. I'm listening to you, and I recognize we can change within these keys. I'm also thinking that these quotes are time-bound. So particularly for the projects in 19, can we seek a commitment from the city to act within a certain time frame when this is actually approved? I heard you say earlier, and I understand this is not a document that binds us to act. It's based on the revenue that actually comes in. But I would be concerned that we might have unrealistic expectations if we pass this the first meeting in June and the quotes that seem to be lower have expired. So I'm just wondering if maybe you can facilitate that, or if you're already facilitating the timing of that.
Yeah, I will just say that as council members, we have no authority to, it's a great question, we have no authority to force the administration to act. And we really, like the Ohio Revised Code says that once we get to the point that we appropriate and if necessary, approve a contract, then that's the council's, like legislative authority's hands off in the sense that we have no statutory ability to be able to do that. So let's just say that there might be a city administration that could be upset at council for some reason or resolution or something, and they then decide that they're just going to see this capital improvements plan and just say, you know what, screw that, just ignore it and just say we're just not going to do anything. We'll just leave the funds in the city, whatever, and we won't do anything. Then council doesn't have a lot of recourse, but for a very few specific items that we could still take action on, even if the city administration deems that they don't want to do it. And so that's kind of my thoughts. However, that's not necessarily happening. I'm just saying if somebody were upset at us, like they could do that. What I think is going to happen is once we pass the capital improvements plan, we will be at a point that yes, we can work with the city to it. And a lot of times when we get these quotes, they are time bound, but they also know when they work with municipal governments that government runs really slow. And so I don't foresee waiting until June to be an issue for most of the quotes. But if, let's just say, somebody waited until next year to actually take action, then I think it would definitely be an issue.
So just to be a little more specific, I'm noting that the replacement of City Hall's roof system did come in almost 50% less than what we have here.
Yep.
And I recognize, while we can pass this, it gets governed a little bit differently. What would happen if that project is pursued, but it costs more than what's in the key? At that point in time, is it just an administrative choice of how the numbers get juggled amongst 2019? And I think maybe a follow-up to that I don't know that we've talked about is, what if all of these projects come in under? Does that money, in theory, do we just get a chance to say, let's move it to 2020? In theory. No, we're not actually dealing with dollars here, but just conceptually, I'd like to have a better understanding of that.
Did you want me to answer it?
Yes. Well, to some extent, as far as carryovers to 2020, it is dealing with dollars because it would increase our carryover for the next year. Within the year.
Can I interject right there? When you say it increases our carryover, as it relates to the capital improvement plan or the overall plan?
Overall plan, cash carryover, it would change the numbers at the end of the year and the beginning of next year, increasing the amount that would be able to be appropriated for 2020.
Okay.
As we write the new plan at the beginning of next year. Now, within this year, in talking to the auditor of state, we do have some options if there is money available within those keys, because it's already been appropriated to the 7600 key or the capital improvements key for public lands and buildings. If one of those projects comes in significantly less, then the extra appropriations that are left over could be used for other projects within that department. So when we're talking about upgrading the server for the city or other repairs, but they should be as much as possible within that same key, within that same department.
Okay, thank you.
We've got a lot we can do, yes.
Thank you, that's all I had.
Yeah, and just one thing that the auditor, he noted, but I just want to emphasize that if there is any carryover from, well, for one, if something is lower than the projected amount that we had in the plan, I mean, the city administration can then use it for whatever they want if it fits within that key. So, for example, we talked about the computers and about the thing on Mound View Drive. Well, if they knew that it would be $100,000 less to do the roof, and they knew that they had extra in there, they could just decide to, go ahead and move forward as long as they don't need our approval for contracts and stuff. But they could move forward with those other projects, the computers and what have you, without us needing to intervene or adjust anything. But however, if we have a carryover amount at the end of the year and we don't use everything in that key, it doesn't just get added to next year. we have to pass the new plan. The plan that's currently in place right now, that's the plan that will guide the appropriations for next year. So we plan the appropriations from 2019 until 2023. And so whatever we put in there for 2020 will be what the initial appropriations are, unless we adjust the plan again later this year. So just keeping that in mind as well. It's better to spend, for the projects that we have, it's definitely better to get them done in the years that we plan to do them, because if not, then they'll have to readjust everything in future years to make sure that those happen. So. Okay. Were there any other questions about the capital improvements plan?
I just want to, you said you would like to have this passed at the first meeting in June.
Yes,
correct?
yes.
Okay.
So, no, I'll talk about this council meeting. I won't be at the next council meeting just due to another commitment. However, it'll likely, we'll just present it in June, and if the council wants to pass it then, I hope they will, then they can do that.
Sounds good.
Yep.
I was just going to interject, I will also be absent at that meeting,
This is the very next one, or the
the
one in
next
June?
regular meeting of council.
Okay. Cool. Okay. Sounds great. So, cool. Well, that talks about that. So I'll keep you all updated there. I'll probably send an email out to all of council. The auditor, somebody will send an email out just kind of reaffirming as we get closer. If we have updated numbers, we'll put them in there and then resending that out. So.
I did want to raise the next point because it's not in the letter that I sent out, but we do have to approve the tax budget by the end of June.
Okay.
And so I would like to request from the President Pro Tem of Council to schedule a public hearing for the tax budget, that first meeting in June also, since that sounds like that's when we're going to be dealing with some other issues anyway. So if that date works for you guys, I can make sure that the tax budget is ready and published and available in my office as well as online 2 weeks prior to that public hearing.
That'd be perfect. And I'd like to make sure we have a finance committee meeting before that. Maybe we'll do it at 6:30 again before that meeting, but I'd like to make sure that we can get a solid presentation from you on it.
The tax budget will be exactly what the fiscal emergency plan is.
I hear you.
Because we're locked into that plan, it's just going to be the budgetary representation for the projection of the fiscal emergency plan.
For sure, for sure. I still think it's going to be good to hear from you, especially when we look at the bonds for some of the other non-fiscal or non-general fund stuff. So, cool. That sounds good. So we'll connect on that as we get closer. Awesome. So, okay, the next topic is city finances. So, I'm going to kind of turn this one over to the city auditor to discuss some of the items that he has for us.
Great, thank you very much. I did send a letter out, which you should all have. I'll read this letter as part of my report at the regular meeting. So just to kind of touch on each paragraph without reading it word for word right now, you guys should have all been receiving the month-end financial reports via email from my office. If you're not getting that, please contact Kelly in my office. We, in March, have updated the fiscal emergency plan. Current appropriations match the plan with the exception of the few adjustments that we have to make tonight. We are asking a passage of a ordinance for then and now certificate for Fund 81, which is the Board of Building Standards Fund, for a bill at the end of 2018. The cash is in the fund and the appropriations are there. So we just need to approve this bill. And we can talk more on that when we get to that point. Certificate of Estimated Resources were updated. I did want to have it before the Budget Commission for their meeting today. However, there's a change that we have to make to the appropriations to make it balanced, so it will actually go in for their meeting next month. Our general fund closed in April with a cash balance of $2.6 million with an unencumbered balance of $135,000 negative, meaning we have more outstanding purchase orders than we have cash, although some of those are fourth quarter purchase orders, so that's not unusual early in the year. Our revenue is, total general fund revenue year to date is $8.4 million, with earnings tax being the largest source, which is about $6.2 million. We've got our property taxes coming in. We've already done the first half property tax settlement with Hamilton County, which is part of the revenue as noted. There's a couple of things that we can talk about that in more detail at the council meeting. Credit cards, we passed the credit card ordinance. We did get the credit cards issued, one for the fire, one to the health department. As per ordinance, they are only used to pay fees online specifically related to health insurance and Medicaid and Medicare, and licenses for the issuance of drugs through or medications through the fire department. They're not for general purposes. We did pay out the retirees' health plan on time. The total for that was $490,000 for 140 qualified individuals. We're working on our procedures as recommended by the report on accounting methods. And I threw a couple of charts in here you guys have seen before dealing with revenue year to date. The big two issues for tonight, there's really three things on the agenda. The one is the change for permanent appropriations. We do have an updated Exhibit A as a new attachment that should be on all of your desks. In it, there's really four main areas of change. One is under recreation, when we were doing the appropriations, they should have had a decrease to their materials and supplies, $10,300, to match the current fiscal emergency plan from what the initial appropriations were. In the massive amount of changes we were making, it was actually placed, that reduction, within their refunds key, which is the next key down, as opposed to the 7,300. It hit the 8,800 key. So now their refunds are negative 10,300. So we're going to actually increase that 10,300 to zero that out, and then decrease the materials and supplies by 10,300, which is the recommendation of the fiscal emergency plan. So those two things are a wash. It just was in the wrong key by one line. We see an increase in Homeland Security Fund 25 of $12,566. That matches what their Certificate of Estimated Resources is based on their beginning cash balance and their revenue. So that actually just frees up the money they've already got in that fund, makes the fund match what the certificate shows. And then you'll see under the line for decrease, State Highway Fund $5,570 decrease. When we created the fiscal emergency plan, we combine, working with the state, all outstanding purchase orders at the beginning of the year into the fund balance available to be spent that year. Meaning they're looking at it from a cash standpoint. Where mostly what we do is an accrual standpoint, where we say, we want to know what you're spending in 2019 for 2019. The plan actually also lists what you're spending in 2019 on open POs from 2018. So that $5,570 is actually on outstanding purchase orders from 2018 and the final quarter, and should not be reflected in the current appropriations, which should only reflect expenses incurred in 2019. So decreasing that matches what the plan is if you take out those outstanding encumbrances at the beginning of the year, and it matches the Certificate of Estimated Resources. The other big one is earnings tax. We need to decrease that key by $1,750,000. Now, that's the big difference, as all of you know. Fund 89 is the bane of my existence. So that is when earnings tax comes into the city from certain resources, there are contracts that agree. Some of it will be held in Fund 89 until certain benchmarks are met to see if a company gets a refund. Usually 50% of the money coming in goes to the general fund, 50% goes into Fund 89. The state auditors and the Fiscal Emergency Commission want all of that mixed together. So in the fiscal emergency plan, it always shows a little higher. In 2019, it's $1,750,000 revenue and expenditures coming in and spent out of the general fund. But realistically, on our books, as dictated by the contracts that have been negotiated and signed by the city and those companies, they have to actually be segregated into a separate fund. Since they're segregated prior to the money being deposited in the general fund, the general fund's entire appropriation should be $1,750,000 less than the fiscal emergency plan. And it should be reflected in the treasurer of the earnings tax key for tax refunds. So this corrects that, and then thereby makes the total appropriations, that amount less, as well as matching the certificate of estimated resources. We're just separating that accounting out. The money's already appropriated in Fund 89 for that amount, so all we're doing is just decreasing it so that key does not reflect that revenue or expense, that it just goes automatically into Fund 89. Any questions on the new attachment?
So why are we decreasing the State Highway Fund 5570?
Because that was the amount of open purchase orders at the beginning of the year.
That's
So
right.
within the fiscal emergency plan, I believe the amount is showed at $72,000 or $74,000 in that key, but it's actually that amount minus 5570.
I gotcha.
Yes.
That's right. Okay.
It matches the certificate that way.
Perfect.
Any other questions on that?
No, sir.
Good. So our other issue is I sent a letter on May 8th asking the law director to create a then and now ordinance. So Fund 81 is the Board of Building Standards for the state of Ohio. All building fees that come through the building department, 3% of those fees have to be deposited into a separate fund, Fund 81, and then that's a pass-through account. That money, just 3% of all our building department fees goes into Fund 81, and then checks are issued from there on a monthly basis to the state Board of Building Standards. We had an unexpected, at the end of last year, as you remember, a huge increase in our building department fees. And we saw $342,738 for one project. So typically, where a month might have $1,000 or $1,500 in this account being expended out, one month was $10,282.14. So that cash is in the fund. The appropriations are there. But because it is a purchase order or a request from a bill that was generated in 2018, I need the approval of council to pay it in 2019. If it was less than $2,500, I could just do it. But the law says anything over that amount, I need permission from council. So this money's there, this money's appropriated, we just need the okay to pay. And it is an unusual situation where a large amount of money, as you remember from the auditor's report at the end of last year, or the beginning of this year for last year, that a large amount of money came through the building department, more than expected. This reflects that. It would be a nice problem to have again this year, if possible. Any questions on that? Briefly touching on the SSI agreement, there's an ordinance, just to make you aware, that to approve the safety service director entering into an agreement with SSI software for an upgrade of eGov. This is the financial software and billing software for the water department, upgrade for the entire city. This has been approved by the Fiscal Emergency Commission, approved by, it's in the appropriations, it's been approved by council. All this is doing is saying it's okay for the safety service director to sign a contract because of the significant amount. It's $170,000 over two funds. So that's just an approval for something we already know we need.
Perfect. Are there any other items that you have for us?
I believe that's it
Okay.
that I have.
If you think of any more, let us know.
Yeah.
So awesome. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Stith. So did we have any concerns about the then and now ordinance that he just mentioned, or that specifically? Is there any? Seems pretty straightforward to me.
No, sir.
Okay, cool. And then the eGov upgrade, if you all remember too, that's in the capital improvements plan. And so, something that's expected, and good that we're going to finally get that out of the way so we can have much better accounting software than what we had.
If I could just address that quickly, because people at home or people in the audience may not understand. We're using financial software from 1995, and we're using old Windows software because if we upgraded to Windows 10, which is what we have to do because Windows 7 is going out, going away, the support for it, it will not run that software from that company. So as part of our upgrade and our capital improvements, we want to go to a more modern financial management system that all department heads could use and eliminate a lot of the paper shuffling and go to more of an electronic friendly atmosphere. This will also allow the generation of reports in a more friendly manner for general public to understand. It will speed up the process of purchase order approvals from writing things out on paper and sending them down and typing them in the computer and seeing if that matches to hitting a few keys. And a department head automatically seeing what their budget is and being able to enter a PO and being told will it be approved or not electronically, and then electronically going to the safety service director and then electronically going to us, and not having the reams of paper that we have to support our current system. This has been recommended by the Auditor of State, and I think it's going to engage a lot of the public and mostly the department heads and the employees themselves to take more responsibility of their portion of the finances and provide better communication.
Perfect. Is there any other items? Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. I do have just a couple of questions about that. So the section 1, I think I see the total here, 170. If I'm reading this correctly, it looks like 131 is supposed to come from the general fund and 39 from the water fund.
That's correct.
And that is, I see the 65.5 in 19 and 20 under multi-department and the capital improvement plan, and the 39 here. Do we know the timeline here for wanting to move forward on this acquisition? I'm curious because I think we were discussing earlier we wouldn't actually approve the plan. Again, it's draft now and has been approved as part of our bigger fiscal plan. But I'm wondering, do we need to fully approve this improvement plan before we act to purchase something?
I do not believe that we do. Just to clarify too, that $39,000 from the water fund is for their utility billing and utility tracking software
That's
portion of
separate,
it.
I'm sorry.
That's part of it. It's just the entire upgrade is $170,000, and it's split between the general fund and the water fund, and that is actually all appropriated and approved in the fiscal emergency plan for this year.
So it's
we'll
in the
encumber it all
fiscal
this year.
recovery plan and it's in the capital improvement plan.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, so with that, I'd like to go ahead and try to schedule our next meeting, if we can, get the calendars out. So we probably should do it. We need to do it sometime between June 3rd and June 10th. Mr. Stith, do you have any, other than not being available, I think Thursday and Fridays? Are there any other dates, or you all too?
I don't believe so.
The week of the 3rd, I'm going to be at youth camp for church, so I'll be gone out of town.
Okay.
But, I mean, if everyone else can meet, that's fine.
No, you're fine. And actually, the 10th I can't meet. I do have a prior appointment. We could do the council meeting on the 11th. We could do what we did this week and meet at 6:30 on June 11th.
June the 11th?
Yep.
Yeah, that's fine.
That would work for me.
Okay. Yeah, we'll schedule it then. So we'll have the updated capital improvements plan then. Well, yeah, we'll review it one more time before council person sees it there. But that sounds good. So yeah, is there any other topics we want to discuss at this meeting?
No, sir.
Okay, great. So with that, we will go ahead and adjourn. Thank you all.
Thank you.